Tim,
Flattered.
so explain to me your background. Where'd you come from? Like how you got started in motion graphics.
Overall, I grew up in Heber, Utah, which is kind of up by Park City, and when I was growing up, it was a smaller kind of, it wasn't really a farm community, but it's kind of a bedroom community. There was, you drive out. So when I was in high school, there wasn't a lot of introduction to this type of stuff, animation or whatever. And I had a couple of teachers that were really good about trying to get you exposed to different careers, thinking long term. I had a journalism teacher who had a TV broadcasting class, and then another teacher who did, it's called multimedia, but it was just kind of like you did little multimedia projects. And it was kind of, so that gave me my first exposure to realizing what some of this stuff could do. And it was back before motion graphics was even a thing. But they kind of helped connect me with some internships when I was in high school, and then later on when I was kind of just about ready to finish high school, they kind of put me in the path of people who were doing this type of stuff, doing After Effects work and design work. And it really gave me a kind of a site that I could see, okay, well, I've always loved drawing. I love comics. I love sci-fi and fantasy. And that was kind of, I was a huge nerd. Loved all that stuff. Loved video games. And I could finally, I started to see that there's a career path for maybe some of this stuff. If I wanted to work as a creative, if I want to make things. And so I lucked out and got a couple internships that put me in a position where I could do some networking, but also kind of be mentored by these guys who knew After Effects and knew the software, but also really talented designers. And that kind of carried over for a while, and I ended up maintaining those relationships after high school. And I tried on and off, somewhat successfully, somewhat unsuccessfully, to go back to school and get the degree. You're raised and you're taught, go to school, get a degree, and then get a career. And my path was kind of a little bit more of a ping pong ball between those things, because I felt like I'd found a career, but I would try to go back to school to get the degree and just kind of successfully. I wasn't a very good student. I guess that's the main takeaway. And I did a couple classes at UVU, which was back in the day was UBSC, and I started doing some art classes there from a really great teacher. His name's Perry Stewart, and he's kind of a bit of a big icon there because he's a really fantastic teacher for illustration design, and that really got me excited about getting back to kind of the roots of drawing and more of my comic book stuff. And that got me excited. I found out about a school out in Pasadena called Art Center College of Design, which is just amazingly hard. So I applied, got in there, and loved it. I was surrounded by just amazingly talented people. And at the same time, I was kind of like, well, this is great, but I'm looking at, if I wanted to go be like a portrait painter or an illustrator, so I was looking at quite a long path to kind of pay your dues and to meet people and get in. And at the same time, I was getting little offers here and there to do freelance work and bring in money. And so I got to the point where I was weighing, okay, do I want to stay doing this and go into deeper debt with student loans, or do I want to, maybe I can kind of create a career out of this with working and learning on the job. And I ended up kind of putting school on hold, left to go kind of work freelance for a while, ended up back in Utah, working for a couple different companies here, and made some relationships back in Utah of all places. Met a guy named Mike, and we were working together at a little studio, and we talked on and off about, hey man, how great would it be to someday have our own shop, and how awesome would that be, and maybe we can have a place. What would be perfect is having a place above like a pizza studio. Oh, that'd be awesome because we can just go down, right? So we joke about that, and I didn't realize till years later. Well, I'll finish that story in a minute. And then so I worked with Mike, and he actually left a agency job and came over where I was at so that we could kind of work together. And then I got an opportunity, an offer to go work at Disney. And I was like, all right, see you, man. I'm out of here. And I went to Southern California to work and still kept in touch with Mike. But I was kind of down there just kind of living the dream. You know, I felt like I was down at a place where there was lots of jobs and opportunity. And eventually I left Disney and just was working as a hired gun, bounced around to just a bunch of different studios down there doing odds and ends of anything. And this is about a time where like motion graphics was finally like a recognized term, right? It was no longer you're doing animation or you're doing design or anything, but motion graphics was the phrase. You know, motionographer was out, and it had kind of been labeled as a thing. So there was lots of work for guys that could animate, new After Effects, and a little bit of design. And I was loving it. But I kept in touch with Mike back in Utah, and he had got together with a guy named Eric, and he's like, hey, we're going to start our own studio. We're going to call it Nocturnal, and we're gonna make tons of money and do cool work. You should come join us. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, man. Well, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure, because Mike was quitting his job, full-time job with benefits and security, and he had a wife and a child. I think he had one child and one on the way at the time, and he was taking a risk, and so I didn't see any risk on my hand, because if things didn't work out, I just go get another job down here in LA.
Right.
And at the time, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll join. I'll put my name on it, whatever. And I'd never met Eric, but Mike's vouched for him, and I trusted Mike. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, yeah, let's do it. And so we cut together kind of a little group reel, and then was shopping that around. But I was still in California, and I was still just working jobs here and there. I'd probably go out for 3 weeks and work a freelance gig, and then come back, and we'd maybe do a little job together or something here and there. But it was more of just a title for a co-op in a sense. And then I hit a point where things with Nocturnal were starting to take off and get busier and busier. And then I had been up in San Francisco working on a job. It was for CES with Cisco. And there was a production company up there that was putting this together, and it was an awesome project with the group. The people were fantastic, but it was these nightmare days. It was like a month long of these 14, 15, 16-hour days, and I was just exhausted. And when you work as a contractor and freelance in those situations, you kind of like, once you sign a contract, you're kind of their property, so to speak. Like, you just
right.
You're on their time, and you kind of give up control of your time, and you're there till things are done. And it was great. I got to work as I had a good title. I was working as the AD, the art director on this, and I had a lot of creative input that was awesome and a lot of responsibility. But it just, these days, it broke me. Like, it was so long and just exhausting. And it was like, at the end of it, I'm just kind of like, okay, I think I've had enough of this game. I'm going to really try and pour myself back into what we're doing with Nocturnal and see if we can make that happen. Because even though, like, the days aren't going to be shorter necessarily, there's something appealing about being in control of your own destiny, and things were starting to take off. So I really felt like, just commit myself to it, and come back. And I was traveling, doing a couple visits back to Utah, to work with Mike and things. And at that time I had met Eric, and that guy's a stud, and I'm like, okay, we can make this work. Let's really commit. And then while I was in Utah visiting one time, I met my wife, and who would become my wife a few months down the road. And then we ended up getting married, and so I was back in Utah full time and just totally dedicated to building up our own shop. So that's hopefully,
wow.
I mean, it's kind of condensed version.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I haven't heard those stories about you being at Cisco doing the freelance work over there, and just how busy it got. So with your responsibilities now with
it was a studio called First Person up in San Francisco, and Cisco was their client. So I wasn't actually at Cisco, but that was who the product was for.
Gotcha. And you were a freelancer for First Person or whatever you said.
Yeah. So I was just down I had somebody send me a listing, said these guys are looking for work, you'd be perfect. And I just replied and said, hey, I might have some availability, but I'm not from the area. And I think they kind of jumped on, because if you're a motion designer in LA, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of had some cachet to it at the time, because it was where, I don't know, the field or the movement or whatever you want to call it was kind of like taking off and growing. So you got a little bit of extra clout, whether it was earned or not. I think just being in that market, like there was a little bit of equity to the idea that you're a motion designer from LA. So I definitely rode some of those coattails with other guys. It wasn't anything, but yeah. So I went up there and did that, and it was exhausting.
How was the transition from being a freelancer to just being full-time nocturnal?
That's a great question, and I think so. When you're a freelancer in a big company or even a medium-sized company, you're typically just kind of a cog in the machine, right? And you can be a bit of a generalist, but typically you'll be a little bit more specialized into certain areas. And it's a great experience because you just kind of can put your head down and focus on a certain element. And I think like working as a motion designer in an agency it's a little bit more generalist work, where like if you were working on a feature film, you'd be super specific to like one area of technical expertise. And then when you're in an agency, it's a little bit removed from that, because you can kind of sometimes you might have a project totally put in your lap. It's like, okay, here's your audio, here's your designs, here's what we need, run with it. But most of the time you're working with, an art director who's above you, and then a creative director who's above you, and then an account executive who's working with the client. And so sometimes that's good and bad, because there's these systems put in place that interpret, it's like the game of, what do they call it? Telephone. You ever played that when you're a kid, where you've got a line of people and one person whispers something, and then it gets to the end of the line, and it's something completely different. And so, and it's not always like that, but if you don't have people that are really good communicators, so that the client expresses their desire and their wish, and then the client executive gets it, and it comes through those filters, and by the time it gets out of the animator, sometimes it might be something that's completely different. And unfortunately, you're the one doing the work. So if things aren't hitting on task, you're the one that's going to stay and fix it. And as an animator, or somebody at the bottom of the line, a lot of times you think, oh, okay, well, if I could just, if I had access to the client, or if I knew these things, I could probably stop some of these problems. And then when you leave that type of scenario and you start your own shop, you realize really quickly that you wish you had some of those buffers between you and the client, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to learn that game a little bit, because it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, look, I've got all the time in the world now, I can do whatever I want. You're still kind of like, you're taking on all those responsibilities, and you have to kind of change. At least for me, I had to kind of change my mindset about a lot of things, I think. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, that answers the question. So we talked about something when we were on the phone before about the idea of listening to the client and the client's needs, and before you kind of try to persuade the client to do a project where you would gain skills, but now you're kind of looking at the client and then fulfilling his needs, and whatever technology you need to learn or skills you need to learn, it's for a purpose of helping the client.
I feel like a lot of us really want to do something cool. Like we want to make something that looks awesome and that our peers will recognize as, like see as how great it is and ask us how we did it, and it's like and I love that about the community. Like there's this, it's not competition, but it's like you want to continually be improving. You want to share that experience with other designers, right? Like we look for validation and appreciation of our peers, and at least I do, and that means a lot to me, and it's a big part of why I do stuff. And when I'm doing work on my own, or when we started the company, I kind of had to find a ways to break out of that, because one of the things that's really important, I think, to all of us is improving our skills and getting better, like finding ways to communicate ideas in a in a more intense way, something that we, that it creates an emotion, right? And we want to do that. And a lot of it, we see that as technical things that we can learn. Like, okay, if I could figure out rigging in Cinema 4D or this other program, I can have a character that kind of communicates these things, and that would be awesome, because then I could, the client could really get their money's worth with high production value. And it kind of, like, one of the mistakes that I saw myself doing a lot was trying to fit the client's request into one of the technical elements that I was learning or trying to learn, right? So, like, let's say I was really focusing on doing nice, beautiful 3D renders. I would try and find a way to fit what the client was asking for, and say, okay, well, what if we try and tell that story with this new skill? And that made for, and it makes for, really painful experiences in my past jobs, because instead of like sitting and listening to the client, like really getting that communication down of like, okay, what is it you're trying to achieve? What you want a video, but what is that for? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish with this? Are you trying to like increase your brand image? Like, you want people to see your product as high value? Are you trying to teach people about your product? It became about like needing to ask questions and get to the heart of what the client wants. Because, and a lot of times when we're working, like those of us who have started our own shops, we're working more directly with a client who may not have any agency experience, or they don't know the vocabulary to communicate the things that they need. So
Right.
it becomes up to us to kind of tease those things out of them, right? And say like, and we might be able to say, okay, well, it sounds like what you really need is this two 60-second videos that communicate these two different parts of your aspect. What, parts of your company, your product that communicate X, and this one communicates Y. And, you need to host those on your site, and you need a site. We don't do that. Here's somebody else who can help. Let's help find that solution versus, okay, because the client may come to you and ask for, I need a 5-minute whiteboard video, right?
Right.
Nobody, I don't want to do that.
No.
I can't think of a worse phrase to hear is like, I need a whiteboard video.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah,
It's
bad.
But that's also an opportunity to try and say, okay, why is it? What is it about a whiteboard video that you feel works? Why is it? And a lot of times, okay, well, I have a low budget. I can't afford something that's more production heavy. Or this company that's my competitor, they did one and it looks great and it seems like it's working. Whatever. And I guess I kind of steered away from the main point because, and I guess the question is,
I think you're on a roll, because I have that question. When do you have those conversations? It sounds like you're having it pre-work or before they pay you anything. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and that kind of leads into something else I think that you can do. Like, it's tough when you're starting out, because you don't turn down any work, right? Like, you take on everything. But and that can be something you don't learn till much later, because you think if you tell the client they're wrong, they're not going to want to work with you, and you're out, $2,000-3,000 for a 5-minute whiteboard video. When in reality, like, that might have ended up being a huge nightmare for you, because you would have hated the work, you didn't want to do it, and the whole time you're like, this isn't worth the money. And the client they're not getting what they want, and so even though they asked for it, they're getting what they asked for, they're not getting what they want. But you're stuck, and it ends up being this really negative experience. And at the end of the day, you probably will burn a bridge with them.
I think that's. I was going to say I have a meeting with a potential client tomorrow, and he's kind of in that boat. Startup company. He has different needs than if a company is already established. And so I've been thinking the whole day of what I can offer him, and That was a question I had. When do you have those strategic conversations? Do you charge for those strategic conversations? Do you write out a plan for them, or is that part of your service that you offer them and you charge them money for it? And it seems like you guys, you will strategize with them before you even take a paycheck.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I think it could be kind of loaded, but I would say yeah, like, and it's not so much a full on strategy, but it comes with it, you need to be able to justify your services a little bit, right? And especially if you're going up against other, like if they're looking at other people and they're bidding out the job, right?
Right.
There's information that you need to get at before you can provide a bid, right? Before you can give them a price. And part of that information is like, and you may not be giving anything out, but it might be you're asking these questions to understand the client's needs. And in doing that, you also kind of get to know the client and figure out, okay, well, do I even want to work for this person, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Totally.
And I think it can be dangerous to think, oh well, I'm giving away the milk for free, right? You know, like I'm giving this person insight into something that they could just take to somebody else.
Right. Yeah, they could.
Yeah,
they could.
And I think the much healthier way to look at it is like, okay, yeah, they could take my thoughts and my strategy and take it to somewhere else, and get a lower price. And if they do that, good riddance. You didn't want to work for that anyway. Like that.
Right.
That's not the type of client that you couldn't turn them into a long-term returning customer. They wouldn't.
Right.
And
I think
value what you've brought.
If you give them free information and then they're just going to take it, go with somebody cheaper, I think that's, yeah, you don't want to be working with somebody like that. They take your, information, they establish a relationship with you, they continue using you, then you want that totally. But I think that's part of the game sometimes with business and marketing is you have to give out free information for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even, I feel like it's not even in a sense, it's information that will protect you, and protect your interest as much. And you need to be able to say, like, if you're qualifying the client as well.
Sure.
Because if you're in a situation where they're asking you to name a price and they're asking, you to qualify yourself to them, that's not a very, you don't have any leverage, and that's the wrong way to put it, but you don't stand on equal ground with the client. And when you're asking questions, you're probing about what they want, you're seeing, the main thing is just trying to get them to tell you what they want and what they need and what they hope to accomplish by doing this video. But then you can say, look, those are all lofty goals. Here's what we think you need compared on that. And here's the price, and here's why we charge that price. And we never, we never give out a price over the phone. I'm sorry, just to kind of back up a second, you want to be frame the conversation into a way that you're both, you're looking at a relationship. It's just like Tinder. You guys have swiped right, and now you've met up. And this is just one more step before deciding if you want to commit to spending any time together, because it's a relationship, and if you can't communicate at that level, like, it's not going to work, and it's going to be a headache for both of you guys.
Totally. No, I think this conversation has gone in a good direction. I needed to hear all that, so thanks. That's great. What would you say to beginners or people, even like me, who just feel like we need to get better at our craft, and if we're better, we're going to be more successful? I mean, what kind of advice would you give to people who are aspiring to be better motionographers?
Oh man, that's that's a good question. And I would ask you to say, well, what advice would you give me? I know I really appreciate your praise and everything, but that's something, feelings of inadequacy or inability to execute on the ideas I have in my head. I don't know that that's ever something that ever fully goes away, And if you're constantly judging yourself and your skills based on okay, well, it's not as good as I wanted to, or it doesn't live up, look at this piece on Motionographer. Like, I wish I could do that. Like, is it I think it's dangerous to draw comparisons, right? Because that's not like the measure of your success, in a sense that you shouldn't be comparing yourself to other artists and animators, because you don't know what the situation was like there. And next time you go on Motionographer and you see a really sick piece, twirl down the credits on Vimeo and see how many people worked on it. That'll help. You might be like, okay, well, there was 35 people, and it took 2 months or something, and I'm one guy in my shed, cranking away at night.
Right.
And so it's not fair. I mean, comparisons aren't fair. But I would also like, just to get back to kind of where we were talking about before, like the measure of your success of a piece. If you're putting like your video you do against other motion graphics pieces and saying, well, look at that, I wish I could have done, some higher production value, or I wish I had some characters here. Like, I don't think, that matters in the sense that we want to be appreciated by our peers. But if your client says, oh man, this is great, this does exactly what I want, like, I feel like that's a better range of success. And it's going to be, in the long run, something that reduces your stress more, because they love it and they're going to come back to you for work, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
And I don't even know that that's healthy or not, because sometimes there's clients that just are never happy, and you got to just wash your hands and walk away, because that's not good either. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss. He wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and the 4-Hour Body, and I listen to his podcast occasionally, and I've never met the guy personally. I don't know anything about him, but one of his things that he teaches is, find a way to, the most valuable currency that we have is time, right? And if you can find a way to, even if you're making less money, but you can create more time for yourself to spend as you want, like that's where you can find success, right? Is driving those forces. And he talks about, building businesses and things that help you do this. And I thought this was a beautiful idea, but I struggle to figure out how to do that in a service industry like ours, right? Because it can be so intense, and it's sometimes hard to build systems that allow you to, put each project through a similar system, right? You can have checkpoints along the way that you say, okay, each project we do, we do storyboards, we do animatic, we do we do these things and check off with the client that those are there, but everything is still custom in a sense,
Yes, yeah,
so,
totally.
Did we choose the wrong career? I don't know.
It's
think
interesting.
I'd ever be happy doing anything else.
I'm in agreement with you, because when I studied business, and then all my friends, they're just kind of doing their thing in business, it's a completely different mindset in a way, because they think, how do you automate this? How do you scale this? Those are big buzz terms for them. And you're right, with some service industry like motion graphics, especially even custom motion graphics, where you're not pulling from a template, but you're creating a custom project for every single client. It's time demanding. It doesn't, it's not going to free up your time. It's not that scalable in a sense.
Yeah.
So,
and if you're not getting the creative satisfaction out of it, maybe you need to, I don't know, maybe look at reframe the way you're doing it. And because it's really tough. And I think actually that point right there, that I think it's important for designers, young designers, or even designers and animators that have been doing it a while, is to really recognize the value that they bring. I think there can be a tendency to undercharge for the work we do, because we all, we have this mindset of like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not good enough, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't totally do what I want. And so I think we undervalue our work a lot. And that not only hurts us individually, because, you're killing yourself, and you're at the end of the day, you might be making less than minimum wage just because of all the time you put into it. But also, I think it hurts. It undervalues the whole industry, right? The whole
Right.
group of freelancers, because clients, if they can get something for cheaper, that's just economics. They usually get something for cheaper, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I think it's important to like be aware of how much time you spend on a project, and don't think of it as like, well, because I know I did this when I was first starting out. I was like, well, I'm going to tell the client it takes this much time because I want them to think I'm that much better, when in reality it maybe takes this much time. It takes twice as long. So I think it's important to just like be really honest about it and be like, okay, well, I know I'm going to take this much time, and then add on another 20 to 25% of time and make sure you're charging for that.
How much do you think, a beginning After Effects, maybe even a little bit of Cinema 4D designer should charge? If he's charging on an hourly basis, how much would you think is a fair price in the Utah market?
I can't. I mean, that's really tough to answer. What I can do is I can share with you what the rates were in LA about 4 or 5 years ago.
Sure.
And currently, so for a guy just starting out, like, who knows After Effects really well, maybe he's just out of school but has After Effects and some 3D experience, working in a motion graphics place, your starting rate was around $400 for a day, right?
How many hours is that working? Is that 8 hours, or is that more?
So that's where you kind of have to protect yourself, because according to state law, that's 8 hours. But you'd go into any shop and you'd be working a 10-hour day minimum usually.
Right.
So if you were young and naive, you'd get taken advantage of, because you didn't know that, it should be an 8-hour day, and then any hours over that, it should be time and a half. And you need to charge for that, right? 10-hour days are pretty typical for what we do, and just in that industry. So if you were if you had pretty good 3D skills and, monster After Effects guy, your rate would be $500 to $600. And then if you had specialization skills, like you were really good, like simulation guy, and you knew simulation stuff, your rate would go, upwards of that, $500, $600, $700, $800. And that's changed. So I imagine now, it's you probably add a couple $100 to each one of those. But that's a trick question. That I don't think that really is true to the Utah market, because you make what people are willing to pay, right?
Right. Yes.
So it's tough, and I think the rate that you could get if you go in and work at a studio, like you work for an agency or for somebody else, you can't ask for the same rate as if you were working with a client directly, because you've got art directors, you've got other people above you doing a lot of the work for you. You're there as, to maybe do one specific job or something. So I think you need to adjust rates there. And, but I think, you should, this is a mistake. I never did this. I think you should ask for a high rate, you just ask for what you think you can get. And then, you start a conversation and you can work down or up from there. But everybody, I think you need to know what your time is worth to yourself. And if you're going to go to a studio and you're going to sign over your free time, like, you better make sure that you've asked yourself, what is my time worth? Is it worth this much for somebody else to own my time or not?
Right. Yeah.
But also, like, if you get beat up over price, and you take it, that's, you've got a responsibility now to deliver. You can't walk away from the job. But I do think, anybody, I feel like anybody who's in Utah and has who they can, if you can get up and leave, go to a different market, you should go to a different market. Utah is not conducive to freelancers. It's a small community, and I think that's awesome because we can get to know each other. But if you want work and you want to learn, like, just get up, go on Motionographer and start looking at listings, or start hitting up studios, send them your reel. And you're not going to get a job offer, right? It's not going to be an offer for any full-time position, but you might say, yeah, come down we've got a month-long gig. Come down, we'll give you a week, and then we'll see what we can do. Or don't even tell them you're out of don't even tell them you're out of state. Just say, look.
What about do you think that's the case even with all the new startups and the the venture capital money that's been in Utah and all the hype around that? Do you think those companies are willing to pay what motionographers are worth?
No. I think startups in general are not at all. Like everything in a startup is like, I mean, you're pinching pennies. You're trying to keep stuff tight, right? And if you're hired by a startup, that's going to be it's a different type of work. It's not going to be. You're going to have to come up with the systems to do your job, right? And it's going to be very demanding because you're working with people who have no idea what you do, or how you do it.
Right.
And that can go one of either ways. Like you could end up with people who are like blown away by everything you do, or people who really undervalue everything you do. And if you're young in the field, I don't think you're going to have the type of experience where you're confident telling people no, and you're telling people you're crazy. And I think there's real value in going down to a big studio and being a cog in the machine and having to deliver on things and seeing the processes that go through and how you build stuff out. And there is a lot of startup work. I think if you're a coder, you could get any job, get tons of job in Utah. I don't know. I think it would be harder as a motion designer to just get work. Like, I mean, there might be a listing for it, but I would be really weary about that experience, right? Because you're working with people who are not familiar with your job at all. And they might think motion design is a catch-all, like you're doing Facebook videos, or you're doing, you're filming, or you're animating. So it would just be like the same as anything else. Look at it as a relationship that you've really got to figure out what they want from that, and then whether that's something you want to do or not. If you decide to switch careers and you're just picking up After Effects on your own and trying to learn it, I just say try and get yourself down to like an animation studio or something, not somebody that's not working on feature films, just commercial work, and just get yourself plugged into that scenario and do it for like a year to 2 years, and then come back and do your own thing. It's really, I think it's valuable. I think those agency experiences are different than an agency in Utah, in the sense that so Utah ad agencies or an ad agency down there, like those are design and animation agencies. And you'll see the process a little bit better, I think, than you would in
for
Utah.
Sure. I think so too. I think it's super valuable if you get that experience. You can bring it wherever you go. Yeah. Well, Tim, gotta close up, but it's been a pleasure. So thanks for participating. Thanks for the podcast.